please. My name's Scott. I'm an alcoholic. I live in Belmar. We got Tommy from the Bronx. I'm really glad to be here. I want to thank Nicoletta for sharing her experience on step one. I want to thank Rick and Elizabeth and anybody else that had anything to do with putting this thing on here. I'm so grateful to be here with my friend Jimmy and Tommy and Peter and our friend Craig. We got Eddie and Freddie. It's like, oh, here we go. Step two is all about power. Nicoletta spoke very eloquently about the powerlessness of step one. And if I haven't been leveled by that powerlessness, I'm not going to go anywhere. But if I have been leveled by that powerlessness, what am I going to do about it? Where am I going to go with this stuff? Step one backed me so far into a corner, and this may sound crazy in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, but it wasn't so much my drinking, because I wasn't currently drinking, but how was I living at the time? How am I living today where I need to have a step two experience? Because I sat in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for years without having a real first step experience, therefore I'm not going to have a second step experience. And I bounced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous from the age of 17, well 18, was the first meeting I ever went to voluntarily. I was released from custody on my 18th birthday, so they suggested I go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And I had been to a couple at that point in custody because it was a way to get off the unit. But I had a drinking problem by then, a serious drinking problem by then. And I knew every time I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a serious drinking problem. But when I'm sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, I wasn't drinking. I'm okay now. I know how to manage my own life. I actually, back in about almost 19 years ago, I came back in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I really thought, man, now's my chance to get what I want out of life. So in order to get what I want out of life, I have to manage it. Really not being able to get in touch with the truth. Nicoletta spoke about truth. I don't need to struggle with any lofty concepts about God because I had none. And the way that We Agnostics is written, it's like a genius of spiritual literature. And the fact that a guy, Bill Wilson, was as alcoholic as any one of us in this room. And the fact that he wrote that, to me, speaks of God inspired. Because there's no way around God, and We Agnostics, no matter what my ideas about God are. I don't need to have lofty ideas about God, although many of us have, and we can't live up to them anyway. I would have not had a first step experience to begin with if it wasn't for our friend Peter here. Because after I had walked back into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had gone out and gotten everything that my mind told me would make me happy. I had the wife, I had the house, I'm a stand-up guy again, because I wasn't such a stand-up guy when the marshals came and took me off the streets and locked me up. And after I got out and I dealt with that case, I'm back on the street again. I had no desire to drink. God's very kind. God's grace removed the desire to drink from me because I couldn't think my way through the next drink, as we hear sometimes. And God bless you. I'm just going to think my way through the drink or play the tape to the end. I don't think anybody's consciously trying to kill us with information like that, but that stuff doesn't work for a real alcoholic. And I was never able to pull that off, but here I was trying it again. I'm just going to think my way through this. I'm going to do the next right thing. Billy, you had a reading here. If a better philosophy on life was sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. I can't just do the next right thing. The next right thing to me back then might have been cracking on your girlfriend. Because I know how to worship. I worshiped relationships. I worshiped my position that I thought I had. Maybe in here now, we're worshiping what we think is our position in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've worshiped who I was with out in the street. I've been seeking power all my life. Since I was a little boy, my first memory, I remember it like it was yesterday. My first memories, earliest ones, were of abuse and being afraid. Nicoletta talked about being afraid all the time. And I lived my whole life afraid, never making choices. I made decisions based on fear, and that removes choice. But I had to, what's my choice to be? Is God everything or is he nothing? I had to make a choice, a conscious choice. Even though I didn't know exactly what God consciousness was, which is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. Our friend Peter's going to talk about that stuff. Like where I recognize God. Although there was evidence for it all over my life, I should not be here right now. According to like earthly rules and law. I should not be here right now, but here I am. I'm 54 years old. I'm living the greatest days of my life. And they are fraught with difficulty. There's hardship, sometimes illness, dealing with someone that you may love, that's going through something tough, and we're able to show up for them. But if I don't reach out to God and I try to manage it myself, I'll walk out on another marriage. I worshiped relationships, and I ended up married twice because of it. And when they don't pan out, because they can't, in that regard, I walk away. That's my MO. You give me too much of a hard time, I walk away because I'm secretly worshiping you. I wouldn't even know enough to admit it myself. So am I capable of worship? Absolutely. I had to be shown that. I had to come to realize that. Because worship sounds a little weak. And our book talks about that the God idea may sound a little weak to us. Like, I'm a tough guy. I came from a neighborhood full of tough guys. Come on, you guys you know what I'm talking about. And we can go to the gym and we get puffed up. It's not for our health. I'm not going to the gym to get healthy. I'm going to the gym so I can pump up. Maybe be a little more intimidating. Maybe attract her. Because I want you to think I'm charming and handsome. There's my big book in 20,000 pieces. Because I use it. But I want to attract her. And the girls, you know how it is. You want to look cute. And then we get involved with each other. And you find out I'm not so charming. And I start thinking, well, she's not that cute. And then I walk away from you. But I'd said if it wasn't for our friend Peter here, I probably wouldn't be here because I had gone out and I'd gotten all that stuff that we think is going to make us happy. Now that we're sober, we got to start living our lives. And we get involved in relationships. And sometimes we find ourselves married. Before you know it, I had all that stuff. And I was dying from untreated alcoholism. I'd never heard that term. And I heard that untreated. What's that mean? That's how I'm feeling right here, right now, sober as I'm ever going to get. Now, immersed in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, but not immersed in recovery. I hadn't gotten involved in my own recovery. I still thought I know the score. I know how things are. I know how to get up. I have talent in my hands. I can go do my work, and I'm a stand-up guy in that regard again. People in the neighborhood, they see me. I'm not such a deplorable mess. I convinced her to get involved with me. Geez, I even convinced her to marry me. I must be okay. And I want to blow my brains out half the time. I want to put my brains on the wall. And I'm between 3 and 4 years separated from alcohol. And the thought of a drink in any type of threatening manner, it hasn't entered my mind in years. I don't want to drink. And that's not because I'm such a great guy. It's just God is very kind. God will put the people in my life when I'm ready to hear the people that are talking the truth. And if I struggle with any concept of God, God is truth. I believe God to be truth, not my truth or your truth. Don't look for your truth. And I'm not looking for my truth. I don't know if that's a word we say to sound like we know what we're talking about or what. My truth is more in line with delusion. So what I really want, I want the truth. And our book, our program, it brings us to the truth. And we have to go into the dark to find it. I have to go into the dark to find the truth. See, I didn't know it. I had these ideas about God that weren't, I could be worshiping a God that doesn't exist. Like the benevolent Father that just rewards me for good behavior. here on earth. And I've been undoing my ideas about God as I discover God, the reality of, for years now. And it's a good thing. I'm not the bearer of bad news in that regard. I'm not a preacher of uplift either, believe me, anybody that knows me. But it's not bad news. It's like I may have a lot of ideas about God that I need to let go of. You know, I haven't found any rainbows and unicorns in my search for power and search for God. I've had, just like our program, it sends us into the dark to find out all these things, all this removal. I don't have to acquire anything to find God. I have to have things removed from me. And the whole spiritual life is about getting me to see the truth about things that are no longer working in my life so that I can find God. And I find God in the truth. It's a wonderful program, Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're not involved in the program for your own recovery, I beg of you, and the book says we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And how often did we hear in a meeting, don't get involved in this yet. Don't watch out for that fourth step. You know what I mean? Don't get too well too quick. And I might think I'm getting well real quick, and then a few years down the line, something blows up, the wheels come off all my life, and I'm like, oh, man, I suffer from spiritual blindness. And I think maybe I can't suffer from spiritual blindness today. I think I'm kidding myself. So it was actually separation from alcohol that I was suffering from when I first heard what it really meant to be an alcoholic. My wife and I were going through a very difficult time. I mean, my marriage was impossible. I didn't know anything about love. I still thought love was a feeling, you know, in love, that thing. I thought that was real love. Now, in love, it's like, it's a real feeling, but it's not real love. It either happens or it doesn't, and when it does happen, you know it, but it's not a choice. You ever fall in love with somebody that you probably shouldn't have, right? It's not a choice, but to really love someone, it's a choice. And I choose to love you regardless of how you're acting right now because I need to practice the action of love. I need to practice the action of love so that I can be transformed. And love has saved my life, the action of. And perhaps I'll talk more about that tomorrow. But right now, and I believe God to be love. God has loved me through the worst moments of my life and probably some of the worst moments of other people's lives at the hands of me. And I've been, ever since I stopped the drink, and eventually gotten into the program, involved in my own recovery, I find I keep running into Scott. And what I was asked when I did meet a man to take me through the work, he said, tell me where it hurts. It's like, what kind of question's that? Tell you where. Who got an answer to that one? But it's like if I have a broken arm, like, it hurts right here. If I a broken leg, it hurts here. If I have a cut on my hand, I could tell you where those pains are, but when you're shattered, your interior is completely shattered and you don't even know where to start, how do you answer that question? And I've been spending the past 16 years or 15 or more years finding out these things, and everything I find out, I have to bring it to God. Now, that takes faith, and sometimes it takes blind faith. A lot of the time it takes blind faith. And the early Greek interpretation of the word faith is trust. So I have to trust. It's like we're getting chased down Kensington Avenue. People are going to kill us. And you're around the corner, and there's an open door on an abandoned building, and it's dark inside there. But you run in there, and you slam the door shut because what's chasing you is going to kill you. You don't know what's in there, but you do it. And if any of us think we're not capable of that kind of trust, have you ever been handed something and you consumed it? You didn't really know what it was. Right? Anybody go cop a bag of dope? I know this is AA, but here we go. Anybody cop a bag of dope and then take it to the lab to get tested first? No. I trusted that the bartender gave me what I ordered. I trusted in that. I had absolute faith that drink was going to provide for me the spiritual experience that I didn't know I was seeking my whole life. I saw power out in the street, and I found it. And when I found alcohol at the age of 12, it was like a shot of freedom to me when it washed over me. And I chased after the same thing. Some people were looking for that escape hatch in food and sex and gambling, whatever it is. I find out I've been seeking God all my life. But I had no idea what I was suffering from when I had put the drink down. And I ran into Scott, and what makes Scott run? I didn't know. But I've been spending the past 3 handfuls of years finding that stuff out. 15 or 16 years of working this program, you find out some things. And what I found out is God is real. And God is more real than I ever imagined. And it's not the God that's just going to, pour love on me in the form of a good relationship, money in the bank, and a good job, and all that stuff that we think is going to be, this is God consciousness, or this is living. We hear terms like living in the sunlight of the Spirit, or we have entered the world of the Spirit. You think about the type of thoughts that provokes inside of you, and it's like, it feels warm, like palm trees and warm ocean and maybe a dolphin jumping out of a wave or something. And Jimmy comes by and he's got sandwiches and Eddie got a couple cold drinks. Oh, man, I'm living in the sunlight of the Spirit. And where I end up is I end up in a desert, with full of dry bones and sharp rocks and stuff. Because it's time to let go of things that I've been standing on all my life. But I find, I wouldn't say comfort in standing on top of some of those sharp rocks, but some of those sharp rocks are the truth. And as hard as it is sometimes to live in the truth, I can stand on the truth today because it's firm ground. And I can stand on that, as opposed to trying to have life suit me, or living in a delusion, and it's going to blow up in my face again and again and again in my life. So it's like, all right, well, what does it look like when Scott's not drinking? Well, Bill was wise enough to put this on page 52 in We Agnostics, and it says we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. The same readiness to change our point of view because of our drinking. Now we need to apply that to our everydays, too. It says we were having trouble with personal relationships. Can anybody relate to that? Okay, what are you going to do about it? You're going to try harder? We couldn't control our emotional natures. When I'd first started working with my sponsor, I was like a psycho and sober. I mean, driving, I lived in Burlington City, all my work's in Philadelphia, so I'm on I-95 all the time. And I was the guy that would drive right up to your bumper. You got to get out of my way, man. And people would, they didn't like that. Well, of course not. And I'd get into arguments on the road, and then I would chase people down the highway, get off at the wrong exit, catch them at the light. They do that whole insane thing, the type of stuff that gets you shot. Couldn't control them. We were prey to misery and depression. Prey to it. You ever wake up in the morning and you got the vulture on the bedpost? And if I'm prey to all this stuff, I would like to submit that this stuff comes with the illness. And that I need to develop a way of living to respond to this stuff. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. Now, I'm not living all over page 52 the way I was when I first showed up to my sponsor, but I'll be damned if this stuff isn't trying to sneak its way through a little crack in my armor. And I've armed myself with this book that's falling apart. But it's my practices and my disciplines that I embrace in the morning, and it gives me a shot at going out there into the world, and I'm not like a loaded firearm or a can of unprotected gasoline. And that's what I was before I started working this program. Being prey to misery and depressions means I don't get a vote when it shows up. I don't get a vote and when any of this stuff shows up. But what am I going to do? How am I going to respond to it? It's like a gazelle doesn't get a vote and when the lion shows up because it's a prey item. Prey, prey. And if I'm prey to alcoholism, I need to have an effective response to it. And I need a power that's far greater than myself. I've been trying it myself my whole life, and it doesn't work. Right? We had to quit playing God. Why? I can't keep myself safe. And that's what I've been trying to do with all my character defect, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow, is I want to keep myself safe. I want to feel safe in my own skin. We couldn't make a living. I was always able to make a living, but I mean, make money, but I would have trouble with personal relationships on the job, and now this job's not the right one for me. And what if you do make 6 figures? Still, okay, great. What about a way of life? Is our job just a living? What about a way of life? I couldn't make a real way of life that I felt useful and had joy in my life. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. I made more decisions based on fear, and they weren't real choices. How's that sound? I think just because I'm not drinking today, I'm making choices in my life. But perhaps they're just decisions based on fear. We were unhappy. I've had frenzied happiness, excitement, but I didn't have real happiness or joy. Forget about joy. And I equate happy with pleasure. So that's what I did. I sought pleasure. And a wise man or woman, I believe today, is suspicious of pleasure because it can rob us of joy. Couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. I couldn't be of real help to my wife when I met my sponsor. I couldn't be of real help to my son, who I hadn't seen in years because I wasn't allowed anywhere near him. And then that phone call came that I thought never would. See, I never think God's going to show up. I need to make this happen. I need to put my cape on and fly in there and get everybody in the courtroom and have this judge demand that I have my visitation because I need to make it happen. When everybody I knew that was older and wiser than me said, just relax, you continue to do the right thing and live honestly, pay back what you owe, and be patient, he'll come to you. I didn't believe that. So I end up going into court, and the judge says, well, what do you want? Because he was a teenager. He says, I don't want to be forced into anything. Okay, case dismissed. And I'm standing there like, what? Are you kidding? Well, the day did come when my son did call. And now I'm like, oh, my God, he called. I'm vibrating because my son called, and we're going to meet. And he was 17 years old at the time. 3 years had gone past since I was in court trying to force him into this thing. Do it my way. I'm going to manage this. And he's been with me ever since. He works for me. I just got him signed up with the Plasterers local. If he wants to take over my business next year when I move to Florida, he can have it. If he doesn't want to, he can work, I gave him whatever I could. But I do remember when he first started working for me, I was a little bit of a tyrant. Because I need to make this happen. I need him to want what I want for him as much as, he needs to want it as much as I want it. So it was just the same stuff wearing a different hat. Me trying to have my way. Not much asking for God. And I'm suffering in my marriage to where I want to put my brains on the wall and I'm blaming her. And she slips a CD into the dashboard of the car, and it was my friend Peter. You talk about step one, what it really means to be an alcoholic, physically. And it clicked in me. That's why I drink like that. It'll never change. It never did. All I had to do was search my experience. And if we don't know where to find it, open up to the doctor's opinion. And if you're the real alcoholic, you'll find it. And if that doesn't drive me into softening up the battlefield, so to speak, for step 2, I don't know what will, other than the way I'm currently living now, sober. It's like before the D-Day invasion in World War II. They dropped 1 million tons of bombs on that beach to soften it up for the invasion. Step one had softened me up. And I had a first step experience, truly. And it was an awakening listening to somebody on a CD while driving along with the woman I blamed for all my problems. But I was just that ready to hear it. And I didn't have to have lofty ideas about God. I was willing to run with whatever ideas this man had about God. And there was a workshop going on in Staten Island in Mount Manresa. There was a conference called Fellowship of the Spirit, and the New York one had died down, was it? And then our friend Bart was doing it. And then another friend of ours who's not here anymore, Tom, he put this workshop together. And two of the co-founders of the original Fellowship of the Spirit in Colorado came to do the workshop. But I had heard my friend Peter was going to be there, and I'm like, man, this is the guy. He already had changed my life and had no idea just by putting that information out there and my ability to hear it and be motivated by it. And I'm thinking, I got to get this guy to sponsor me somehow. And I go out there. I don't know anybody. Jimmy was there and his wife. And that's where we met. Well, these two older guys, it was Mickey M. and Gary Brown, taking everybody through the steps. And at the end of the thing, the whole weekend, here comes my good old pal, my brain, my mind, starts lying to me again, starts reasoning with me, and I'll get to that. It starts reasoning with me and says, do you really need a sponsor? How bad is it, really? You got a good job, you're a stand-up guy again, you can look yourself in the mirror, although looking at your own life, the reality of it makes you sick. Look at your wife, she's hot. You can work it out. It's like trying to drink successfully again, but I'm going to apply that to my life. I'll just do the next right thing, whatever you want to tell yourself. I'll be a good guy, I'll try to be a good, I was trying to be a good husband. And I couldn't pull it off. And my mind comes in, starts telling, oh, do you really need a... And the place was clearing out. Everybody was packing their bags and leaving. And reality sunk in. The same way that reality sunk in the day before I wised up. I didn't even wise up. I wised up when I asked God for help. Please help me. I'm dying. I'm sitting here drinking and I can't stop. And then she came through the door with a bottle of booze for me and some other stuff, and I went right back to drinking again. A potent prayer, God, please help me. I can't stop drinking. And the next day, the marshals showed up at my house and kicked in the door and took me out of there. It was like that. I realized that God showed up. And I got on my knees and I said, God, please help me. Who do I ask? Do I ask Peter? Do I ask Gary? Do I ask Mickey? And when I got up, that man, Mickey, was standing there looking down at me. He says, what's up, brother? And it was like, okay, here comes Scott. Well, I want to ask him to sponsor, like, how's a tough guy ask somebody to sponsor them? It's like The Jerk, Steve Martin. You ever see The Jerk? I don't need you. I don't need anybody except this paddle ball and this chair and this ashtray, but that's all I need. I don't need you. That's how I walked out of relationships. And then I'm the jerk walking down the sidewalk with my stuff, my pants down around my ankles. Now it's time to pony up and ask somebody to help me. And I give him the old, and I asked him to sponsor me. He says, I'm glad you asked. I was hoping you would. Like, what's that mean? He was watching me the whole weekend. He says, tell me how you see yourself. Now, you know how it is when you come into AA and you want to put your hand up and sound good. You want to have a good share. And you just talk all this nonsense maybe that you heard someone else say, or you read a little bit in a book, or who knows what it is, but we want to sound good. And then we all chant, we think not, when they read the promises, even though I don't believe in any of them. It was like one of those moments. And I said, well, he says, tell me how you see yourself. Oh, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. I care about other people, and I want to be helpful, because that's what I heard Peter talking about in some of his talks, where you actually show up to Alcoholics Anonymous to be of service. Not coming here to be fed, but to serve, and never going home hungry again. That's the kind of Alcoholics Anonymous that I live in today. And then I heard him say, live a life of invitation. And I'm like, how do I get there? How do I get there? I have to believe in something. And it doesn't have to be some lofty, white light, cloud parting, sea parting vision of God. I just need to believe that there's something greater than me that can solve my problems. That's what it's, problems. It's one of the most important plurals, I think, in We Agnostics. And it sent me on a trip that I had no idea where it was going, but I was willing to go because step one was chasing me down, man. It was chasing me every day of my life. And I hadn't had a drink nor thought of one in close to 4 years. Now, I don't know if anybody else has had that type of experience in here, whether it's 4 months or 4 years. If you haven't had a drink, who did that? If I'm I'm a lab rat. That's how I drink. And once I start, I can't stop. I remember being locked up. I was behind bars for a year. And I had everything on the line. And they gave me, they were even nice to me. They transferred my state probation from New Jersey to Philadelphia, because that's where I lived. And I had an appointment with the PO the next day. What did I do when I got picked up? I drank. Within 48 hours, I was dead. Dead on arrival. That's me. That's how I try to stay sober. I have no power. But I can figure my life out, and I can get you to date me. Now let's get married. I remember I didn't have a driver's license for like 22 years. But I always had vehicles, cars, trucks, motorcycles. I had Tommy and I were talking, I had a guy at the DMV. I'm like, yeah, man, everybody's got to have a guy. I had a guy that would do, he would do phony insurance papers and phony registrations. And then he would give you a phone, in that way you could take that stuff and get tags. Now, by the time they caught up to you, you're already long gone. And it was great. It was my buddy Nicky DeLuca's brother. I forget his first name. Anyway. The statute of limitations is up. I'm not really hurting the guy. I know amends necessary. But that's how I had to roll. And then I had an insurance agent that knew all the loopholes, and she knew a Pennsylvania loophole that if you didn't have an accident within 3 years, even if you didn't have a driver's license, you could have real insurance. That was like a windfall. This is great. So I'm driving, you know what I mean? I'm just operating as if I do, but I don't. And I got this woman to marry me. She knew nothing about me. She didn't know how broken I was. I was trying, and she had her own stuff too, but that's her business. My business is to get right, so I can be the best representation of this power when we meet. Otherwise, I can't pull it off. I'll walk away from you when you act up. And I remember this insurance agent calling her because she couldn't get in touch with me, my wife, and saying, Scott has to call me because he's got to sign this paper once a year, to prove he hadn't had any accidents because, he hasn't had he doesn't have a driver's license, and this is what, and she was like, wait, what? Now we're already married. She goes, what, excuse me? Would you repeat that? She's like, oh, you didn't know. Scott hasn't had a driver's license in like 22 years. And she was like, really? So, of course, I get the call, and it's like, and me, I'm like, so? Right? I've been down so long, it looks like up. I'm so used to managing my own life that even when I have step one chasing me down, there are times where I will feel just and right in my decisions and have just enough spiritual blindness that I won't see it. And the book says, though we usually don't think so, I will play God in my life. And I have an excuse because I didn't have any sponsorship back then. Well, what about now? What about now? Do I need God as much now as I did then? Probably more. Naivety or being naive. I don't have that excuse anymore. But it's hard to tell an alcoholic they should know better and just disregard something that's as real as spiritual blindness. Thomas Merton says the truth will cast it from our eyes like scales. but that it's always there, looking to blind us again. I heard my friend Peter talk about drifting, where you go on the beach and you set your chair up and you go in the water and you're playing around out there, and when you get out of the water, you can't find your chair or your towel. It's like we don't know, we're drifting down the shore. And it's like, okay, I need to come back to God. I know that to be true now. But what about just coming in here? I practice the steps. I go through the steps formally once a year. So I've been through the steps about 15 times, maybe 16 times. And you don't have to do that, but it won't hurt you. I'll tell you that right now. Now my ideas about God are more like, is my God too small? Could I use a bigger God? Could I rely on God more? Do I believe I'm God conscious enough? Now, like I said, I've been casting aside ideas I had about God slowly but surely, really removing the God that I wanted so that I could experience the God that is. That's been my trip in Alcoholics Anonymous. And yeah, there's no unicorns, rainbows. The only palm trees I get to see is when I pay for the flight myself or drive down to Florida. But it's not like, I'm not basking in the sunlight of the Spirit, eating grapes or being fed grapes, even better. That's not my experience with God. The truth is the truth. And that's what I search for, regardless of how painful it is. And it's been I'm having a great time. I'm having a great life. I've never been able to show up to the people I care about the way I can now. But it didn't start off that way. So We Agnostics says here, if you honestly want to, and you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. Probably. We can't label you alcoholic. And if you're not convinced of it, the book says go out and try some more controlled drinking. Try it. And it sounds like an insane thing to say, but I encourage you. If you're not convinced you're alcoholic, go out and get convinced. And come back beat up enough that you'll do anything. Because if I'm not willing to do anything, I'm not going to do anything. That's just the way it is. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Only. Who wants to hear that? Who came here to find God? Really? Who came to Alcoholics Anonymous to find God? Nobody. To one who feels he is atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. Seems. But to continue as he or she is means disaster, especially if you be an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. I don't know of any other type. If we read what it means to be a real alcoholic, and my experience lines up with that, where is the hope? There is no hope. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. And it's like, really? Alcoholic death or spiritual life? And it's a dilemma. A dilemma, difficult decision between two equally undesirable alternatives. That's my alcoholic death, cirrhosis, whatever, die in the street, maybe put a gun in my mouth sober. Maybe that's an alcohol. My brother died of untreated alcoholism. Sitting on the couch, looking for a little relief. He dead. How many of us take our own lives? I have a friend of mine. I love this guy. He was from Belfast, and man, we used to do some drinking. I mean, we would put a quarter on the dashboard of the truck on a rainy morning. We'd do the rain dance, and it's all right, first quarter to hit that, or first raindrop hits that quarter, we're going to the pub. And I moved that quarter around until a raindrop hit it, and we would go to the pub, and we would both be pretty vibrating from the night before. And we would slam down a couple of shots of Jameson, and then we'd both run to the bathroom and get sick and go back to the bar and do another shot of Jameson and run to the bathroom. And we would do that until we could hold it down. And we would spend the day drinking. And some days we would drink 20 hours straight. Go into the bar at 7 in the morning and close it at 3 a.m. And that was my friend Eddie. And he eventually ended up having to go back to Ireland. And he got sober. And he was about 10 years separated from alcohol. And he suffered from untreated alcoholism. And he wouldn't reach out for help, like in regards to his alcoholism, and not the help that I'm familiar with. And he couldn't take it anymore, man, and he hung himself. And he died sober. But I'll tell you, as God is my witness, he died from untreated alcoholism. So that's alcoholic death. Yet there's such a dilemma here with spiritual life. Alcoholic death. It's insanity. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not real alcoholics. True alcoholics. Didn't we try that with our drinking? Maybe I'm trying that, sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous right here, right now, today. I don't have a sponsor. I'm not working the program. I have no program. But I'll come and say, when I first came into the program, no. When I first came into the fellowship, that's what this is tonight. This is the fellowship we got going on here. The program is in this book, sitting down with someone like Pete or Craig or Eddie or Jimmy or Tommy or Freddie or Nicoletta or any of the other women that can take you through these steps that are in this room. That's our program of recovery. After a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of living, or else perhaps it's going to be that way with you. It's fun, cracks me up and says, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheist or agnostic. So something like half of us thought there was no God, or we weren't too sure about it. And even if I believe in God, it's not my belief that counts, it's my faith, it's my trust. And if I don't believe in God, it's like, do I think God needs me to believe in him in order for him to exist? How arrogant is that? I believed Peter had an experience. That's why I went and sought out sponsorship. I believed that guys like Jimmy and Tommy and Freddie and Eddie and Craig, I believed that these guys were having an experience. I'll run with that. I spent as much time dismissing ridiculous ideas I had about God as I did having moments of realizing what God really is by just looking for the truth. So nobody's got a monopoly or got God I got my rap down on God. Please, who could understand God anyway? Fully. Do I expect God to have like human emotions times 1,000 and that's God? Create a God. Caroline Mace talks about creating a God duplicate, expecting God to show up like a person. Like if Peter and I go out to dinner and I say, would you pass the salt? Of course, you pass the salt. Am I expecting that from God? Or we live in the era of instant gratification. You want to find something out, where you're going, you don't have to get a paper map and study the address and then go to page 10 and block 4 and find the street and do all that. I used to do that stuff when I was a teenager. I could find a car. We drove repoed cars. I could find a car anywhere in any city. Give me the address, I'll find that car. And it took work. Now you just go on Google, bang. Instant, we want God on those terms too. And I'll submit it just doesn't happen that way. I'm not saying we can't get the help we need right here, right now, because you can. But a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. And what propels me through that journey is step 1. If I'm not looking at step 2, I haven't experienced step 1. If I'm not willing to turn my will and life over to the care of whatever I believe might be God or pretend to believe, I have a first step problem. If I'm not writing inventory, I have a first step. Everything we do, everything I do is because I know what's behind me. And sometimes it might catch up with me. I don't have bad days. I have bad moments where I have to respond to selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear. And where's the first place it tells me to go? God. Without step 2, where do I go? Where am I going to go? And here we go about, let's just do the next right thing. Billy opened up with this. If a mere code of morals or better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good friend. I lacked power. I didn't have it. How many of us in this room right here, right now, want to be a better person? And we just, I can't believe I did that again. Why can't I be kind and loving towards people? Why do I gotta, maybe I'm a bully people. I don't know what our thing is, what your thing is. I know the stuff that I've struggled with where I have to continually ask God to please help me be better in this regard. Maybe I need to learn about love. I talk about love and a bug lands on my head. We could wish to be moral, right? I could wish to live truthfully. I could wish to be philosophically comforted. All my lofty ideas about God, the world of the spirit, sunlight, all that stuff. In fact, we could wish these things with all our might, all my will. But the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, my reasonableness, my reasoning, my mind, as marshaled by what I want, my will, was not sufficient. It was not enough to meet my needs. Not only that, it failed utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. And I heard my friend Peter say, lack of power, that was my dilemma. And then he said, with power, no dilemma. And I thought, that's genius. Like, where is this guy, man? But like I said, when I got up to pony up, man, here comes the mind. Here comes the mind. And where's that come from? My reasoning. I want to read a little something. It's on page 53. Middle of the page. When we became alcoholics, crushed, not beat up, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade. It's coming. It's happening. It's right now. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. And if God's nothing, what's that make me? He either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Now, I lack power of choice in drinking. I have no choice over when my body tells me to stop drinking, right? I can't choose to run my own life, right? So step 1 takes choice away from me, but now it's telling me I have to make a choice. I have to choose this. Just like love is a choice. I have to choose to love you even when you're unlovable. Love is that action, not like falling in love that wears off and then I walk away from you. I choose to love you. I had to choose God. And like I said, it didn't need to be a lofty thoughts of God or some wonderful, visions of God. I just needed to seek whatever this power is, not being able to understand it anyway. Arrived at this point, I'm squarely confronted with the question of faith, of trust. I can't duck the issue. Some had already walked far over the bridge of reason, right? With our minds toward the desired shores of faith, friendly hands stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that our minds had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning on reason too heavily that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So a question was put to me: is what step 2's asking of me? Is it unreasonable? And the answer is yes. It goes against reason. I need to proceed forward with that blind faith, being chased by step one. Like I was saying, step one's chasing me down Kensington Avenue. I see the abandoned building with an open door. It's dark in that room. I don't know what's in there, but I know it's got to be better than what's chasing me. I run into the room. I shut the door. That's blind faith. Faith without obvious proof. Blind. I have to walk into that. I have to be willing to walk into that. Yes, we have agnostic temperament and have had these experiences about who looking upon the world and its warring individuals. Look at what's going on now in the world. Warring theological systems, inexplicable calamity. That stuff was happening then. That stuff's happening now. Human history is fraught with it. What are we going to do? Can we match calamity with serenity? And why do I need to do that? Because the world is full of calamity. The world is full of chaos. It always was, and it always will be as long as we are here trying to run the world. Am I the only one trying to run my life? Everybody in here has their own ideas about how their life is supposed to go. Everyone on the road has their own idea about what time they want to get to work, what exit they're getting on, what lane they want to be in, how fast they want to go, and we're all out. And I'll tell you what, I don't drive the way I used to. I'll go into the right lane, and you could drive up my rear end. I won't say I don't get irritated with it, but I'm not chasing anybody down the highway. I'm like just driving, because on most days I realize that everybody else has ideas about how they want their life to go as well. And there's some little practices that down the shade, it's going to talk about how to tap into this power in the moment. But right now, I don't need to worry about down the shade. At this very moment, I'm sitting in here and I'm dying from alcoholism, not even drinking. And I need power, and I need it now. And what am I going to do? If I can lay aside prejudice and even express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than myself, I'll commence to get results. So just the willingness to believe in this power, and I'll commence to get results. My own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. It's sufficient to make the approach. And that's all we're doing here in step 2. We're making the approach. I'm going from this that doesn't work, and I'm going over here, which I think will work. And maybe it's just because I see it in Freddie. I see it in Nicoletta. I know they're on to something, but I can't stay where I'm at. Boy, time flies. Anyway, Peter's going to talk to us about where do we go from here? How do I take this practice and start looking at some real decisions? Thank you so very much.